Hello everyone, it's Tuesday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Wednesday, May 10th marks the one-year anniversary of President Yoon Suk Yeol taking office. Starting with his inauguration, President Yoon started what he calls the Yongsan Era, opening up the Blue House to the public and placing more importance on openness and communication. He focused on certain major reforms while putting the focus on providing a better environment for companies to boost their investments. Meanwhile, he's recently shown efforts to strengthen diplomatic ties with Washington and Tokyo, putting in place strategic clarity. Ahead of the first anniversary in office, Within the Frame would like to take a look at the achievements President Yoon was able to make and areas where efforts are still needed. And for this, we have Professor Song Se-ryun from Kyung Hee University. Professor Song, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And we also have Professor Choi Hyun-sun from Yongsan University. Welcome to the show, Professor Choi.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi. Now, Professor Song, first question to you. Now, once he took office a year ago, President Yoon Suk Yeol spelled out an agenda for three key reforms, which were labor, pension, and education. Why did Yoon believe that changes needed to be made in these areas, and has there been any progress regarding these agendas?
Well, those are major reforms that this society require, but they are slow-moving on all fronts. One by one, quickly, labor reform grabbed headlines early after the standoff with the truckers' union earlier this year and gained some public support. But that made this administration's stance very clear that they will be very hard-lined about it. And we see more crackdowns than negotiations. And because of that, I think that the public opinion is a little bit mixed. Labor unions have declared a war with this administration. So showdowns will continue. I think that the reform in that regard would be noisy and slow. Pension reforms has not made much progress. Besides the national pension, we have other pension schemes, but they all have the structural issues simply because we live longer and have fewer babies to support that scheme. Of course, the situation is the same in most advanced countries, but because of that, I think that structural difficulties will require unpopular decisions going forward, and it's going to be a somewhat over controversial policies and reform going forward. Lastly, the education reform also did not hit the ground running, as amendments to private schools and Higher Education Act and superintendent election rules, etc., have not cleared in the National Assembly. And this is the area where ideological difficulties make more of a contentions between the parties and the camps. So, I mean, these are very difficult and far-reaching issues. So I would not certainly rush to judgment about the progress so far. But the fact that the administration is not really talking to the opposition party about the details is more of a concern. I think that going forward, I need to hear, and the people deserve to hear, more debates and more detailed discussions rather than the headline clashes.
Right, I see. We'd have to just wait and see how all these agendas and reforms are being sorted out. Now, Professor Choi, to achieve what he called these kind of historical missions, I believe policy shifts require cooperation from the opposition party. However, President Yoon has not yet met the main opposition Democratic Party's leader, Lee Jae-myung, even once. Now, what kind of political cooperative action do you believe should be put in place?
I think it is definitely necessary to meet the opposition party, the leader, Lee Jae-myung, who this is not only for the political reason, but for the people's lives. In addition to three major reforms, there are hundreds of things to do in a short time, and this is a very radical change in terms of the international and domestic environment. So maybe President Yoon needs to accomplish so many things for peoples, not only for the political reason. So it is time to open up for our opposition party, like a Democratic Party, and then maybe Democratic Party is a majority in the National Assembly. So there is no way without corporations, there is no legislations passed in the National Assembly. So it is definitely the time. I saw, and many people saw about the President Yoon has a very good socialization skills, as we saw when he met the President Biden. He sang a song, American Pie, with a beautiful voice. And then when he met the Prime Minister, it's a very good skills. So why not the President Yoon meet the Lee Jae-myung and with some soju, and they can open up, and maybe they try to work out together for the people's life.
Right, I see. I believe there were slight technical glitches, but I hope we could have smoother connection. I cannot agree more that people's lives should be prioritized, and in that sense, that President Yoon Suk Yeol would have to need to come up with cooperative efforts with the main opposition, Democratic Party of Korea. Now, Professor Song, on the economic front, high housing prices have long been a concern of people in South Korea, and one of the Yoon administration's major achievements is reportedly a sharp decline in housing prices. Now, what achievements, including changes in law, if there has been any, have been made regarding the housing market?
Well, more than anything, the sharply raised interest rate and the economic downturn have more to do with the decline in housing prices. But given that the construction and housing are some leading economic indicators, depressed real estate market as it is right now is actually a problem to which the government is trying to spur some activities. Fundamentally, we need more or actions in supplying better of the housing units to prevent overheating of the speculative investments. But right now, I don't think that's the concern at this point. I think the government wants to spur some activities so that the housing being the one of the asset making schemes for much of the middle class families in Korea. I think that should be addressed more urgently rather than keeping the prices down.
Right, I see. Now, Professor Song, one more question here. The Yoon administration has been pushing hard to bolster investment from companies as well by easing tax regulations. Now, what were the main tax policies that were softened for businesses, and how are such policies being viewed right now?
Well, last year, as you remember, this administration was pushing for a deeper cut in the tax rate for the corporations, but they settled on the 1% reduction in the top tax rate to 24%. They think that it's still high. It is high for OECD countries, and they're thinking that the better tax rates for the corporation will spur the economic activities more, and spillover effect will benefit more on the economy overall. I think that the thinking is still there. The opposition party, of course, criticized the policy as a tax reduction for the rich and worry that the reduced tax revenue will hurt the welfare budget. But I think it's just something that we have to strike a balance between two parties. But in terms of economic downturns, that is a front burner issue. I think that the policy change will continue to spur up and talked about.
Right, I see your point. Now, Professor Che, we could say the Yoon administration had to face high inflation from the very start, causing the economy to slump. Now, though inflation is slowly being tamed worldwide, there is still work for the South Korean government to do, which is increasing utility fees for things like electricity and transportation. Now, what dilemma is the government facing right now?
Yeah, I think maybe we need to pay the bill, but the late time, because a European country and many other countries, they apply the market price to the energy and transportation. So the maybe their inflation rate is like 2 or 3% higher than us. But our government decide to we can maybe delay or slow the inflation, using maybe our public corporation, like such as KEPCO, Korea Electronic Power Corporations, and then maybe there's gas company and then the electricity company. They try to hold for a while about this price rising up. But the problem is now in April, we have a slowdown about inflation, like 3.7% of inflation is much better situation right now. But the problem is maybe our public companies, like government state enterprise companies now in the very bad situation, which is probably if we just let them live like this in the future, it is a very big maybe disaster, maybe in our stable energy supply system, which means now it is time to we maybe apply the maybe market price to this energy price and then the transportation things. So how government deal with that is hard landing or soft landing, we can see. So I need it is a very important time for our government because this is a very big impact on our people's lives. So but it is definitely we cannot maybe help about the price rising up about the electricity and gas and the transportations.
Right, I see. So we'll have to see what direction the government will take in terms of these matters. Now, Professor Song, briefly tapping into the energy sector, President Yoon is underlining the use of nuclear energy, which is very different from the previous Moon Jae-in administration. Now, this Yoon administration restarted the construction of Shinhanul Unit 3 and 4 nuclear reactors and even secured $30 billion investment pledge from the UAE, setting foundation for the second Baraka nuclear power plant. How is this official scrapping of nuclear phase-out policy working out?
Well, I think it's part of the global trend as well, especially after the Ukraine war. The previous trend of focusing more on the climate change and on the renewable energies has turned tide because there's a concern about the energy security. I think that even the skeptics of the nuclear power plants are coming back to the idea of using the nuclear power. Germany is delaying the stoppage date. France and Japan are expanding the usage of the nuclear power plants. So I think that this government, as conservative as it is making a bet that the nuclear energy will address both the reduced carbon emission and also increase capacity for power generation. But we all know that it's a double-edged sword where the nuclear power generation greatly reduces the carbon emission, but the long-term problem of nuclear waste and safety issues could be a bigger problem down the road. So we don't know whether that would be a very big problem going forward. I mean, Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and Fukushima are both radioactive at this point and will be like that for a long time to come. So we're making a bet, but in terms of the energy crisis, I think that a lot of people are thinking it's a practical policy.
Right, I see. Now, Professor Che, we cannot leave out the diplomatic part right now. President Yoon Suk Yeol brought the years-long strained relationship with Japan back on track. The resumption of a more direct form of diplomacy, or so-called this shuttle diplomacy, has been considered one of his major achievements. Now, in what ways is such a restoration of bilateral ties with Japan so important?
I think it is an important movement, but in terms of the current issues, maybe we need to understand about relations with Japan is two ways. One is based on our contemporary and current issues like a political, military, and economy issue. We need Japan. It is definitely we need that. But in terms of our historical issue, it is not yet solved yet, and so many people suffered from that bad memories. But now the Japan government of Japan is maybe maybe way of the how to deal with our history issue is not that satisfied by us. So the problem we faced right now, we definitely need Japan in terms of the political, military, economic ties, and also we need to have a good relations about those things with the United States. We cannot help. But the problem is how can we deal with the history issues? It needs to take time, but I hope the Yoon administration maybe never give up about this issue. But right now, the many press announcement says our past is just went away, something like that. So there is maybe the later maybe so many that our people also there are many opposition about this foreign policy, but as one citizen and one scholar, maybe without Japan, what can we do? Because we decide and political tie and the economic tie and military ties, we need that. So maybe it is a good way of how we can rebuild this shorter diplomacy, definitely. But in the future, there are something left, especially history issue is very important.
Right, I see your point. Now, Professor Song, at another recent summit with Washington, President Yoon Suk Yeol and Joe Biden announced the Washington Declaration and many other agreements to strengthen ties. Now, what were the major outcomes of that trip, and how significant was it, in your opinion?
Well, in terms of security, we have installed by a Washington Declaration nuclear consultation group that will be installed. And also nuclear submarines will be making regular rounds around the Korean Peninsula. So that sum up to a strengthened security alliance with the U.S. And I think it's very significant that Korea now has gained an important voice regarding the planning and possible deployment of nuclear weapons in Korean Peninsula. In the past, we had none. So in facing the threat of North Korea's provocations, which have been intensifying over the years, I think is an important step. What's more encouraging, I think, is that it strengthened not only with the U.S., but the collaboration in security side with the Japan as well. So the trilateral setup with United States, Korea, and Japan in the East Asia seems more secure than before. I think it has a spill effect as well, as we saw the Prime Minister of Japan came to Korea, and we had some good photo ops and good sound bites from our neighbors. So I think it's on the right direction. I think what is more important is that how we keep that collaborative momentum going forward, so that we can have some benefits not only in the security area but economic exchanges and other collaborative fronts.
Right, I see. Now, moving on to communication between presidential office and the public. Now, Professor Choi, when taking office, President Yoon began what he called the Yongsan Era, stressing openness and communication. And as part of these efforts, he moved the presidential office and residence to the Yongsan-gu district, opening up 청와대, the Blue House, to the public. How successful has this strategy been, and how has it been viewed? Professor Che, hi. Oh, I can't hear you right now. Maybe you're muted?
Can you hear?
Professor Che?
Sorry, can you hear? Sorry. Yeah. No, so maybe it is not yet obvious about what is a result and the performance yet, but it is just only 1 year, so 4 years left. But the problem is when I pass by or the walk or on the car, I can see the president's office, but day by day, the security is getting more enforced, which is maybe the Yongsan should be like open, this should be open and say welcome our citizens, something like that. But there is no sign like that. Or there are so many police lines and policemen. So
I think it is time to maybe decide. President Yoon, he promised with the people about I moved to the Yongsan from Cheongwade because I will open up to the president office for the people. So what is the maybe the result, and then what people want to see that maybe in our next 4 years, people just to watch over about this issue. But after 1 year, we can see that maybe we can go the Cheongwade, all the president office. That is one just little good things, but the main office in the President Yoon's Yongsan office is still closed.
Right, I see. Now, we are running out of time, but I do want to ask this question to our Professor Song. Professor, the 22nd general election of the National Assembly is just a year away right now. And given that President Yoon's major policies require parliamentary backing, the election is very important. And until then, what should President Yoon take into consideration, in your opinion?
Well, I just said the legislative collaboration is very important, and as it is, the legislative power is squarely on the other side. So that election would be very important. I think that the criticism that the President Yoon is facing is right on the money, which is that he is being criticized as a president of the conservative faction, but not so much on the other side. So ideological divide is very much of a concern. I think that he should shed more on his image as a prosecutor general and move on to becoming more a president of the whole country. I say that because he still has not talked with the opposition party, as the Professor Chen mentioned. I think that will soften the people, voters in the middle ground, to see the clear need that this government needs the legislative help, and that comes from having more seat in the National Assembly. I think that storyline is the most compelling one to put to the voters next year. So in order to do that, the President Yoon Suk Yeol should be more of a conciliatory to the other factions, and also working more collaboratively with the opposition party. We need to see that.
Right, I agree. Now, I'd like to ask more questions to our experts, but unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. But thank you, Professor Song and Professor Che, for your insights. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.